with so much information out there, how can we figure out what's going to be working for you? I love this question because it is very confusing. And this is exactly why I feel like I got into this because this is what I was struggling with, right? 10 years ago. And our clients too. Now, first of all, we know what's true within research, or, we know what's at least closest to the truth based on most of the research. A lot of different diet camps, keto, carnivore, vegan, whatever, will kind of like take one study and run with it, right? And then that's proof that something is true. However, with that approach, you could almost prove, any claim, not every, but just about every. So instead of looking at single studies, even though we might still be pulling up single studies on this podcast as well, we need to consider what's probably going to be true based on most of the research, right? Because we kind of know how things work. At least we have a very good idea, right? We know that weight loss, is achieved through a calorie deficit. If you want to gain weight, we need to be in a calorie surplus. We need to be managing our energy balance based on our goals, right? We know the fruits and veggies are healthy for you. We talked about steps and stress recently. Things like high protein diets, how they can be beneficial for muscle gain, fat loss goals, etc. All these principles of nutrition are basically what we know is probably true. So figuring out what works for you basically comes down to getting you to adhere to those principles, right? How can we get you to adhere to calorie deficit? How can we get you in the gym, lifting close enough to failure? How can we get you to get your steps in, etc.? And that takes a little bit of time, right? It's a matter of trying, or at least getting started. And figuring out what works for you might take one shot, maybe two, maybe even way more, because with so many approaches and programs and coaches, etc. out there, and especially with social media being so confusing, sometimes, might take months or even a year or longer to actually find, okay, now I finally got something that I know I can stick to in the long run, right? Anything you would like to add there, Christine?
Yeah. We kind of talked on this last episode. For example, people often go for keto, but they love carbohydrates. So you really have to ask yourself, is that going to work for you, right? When you don't actually need to be removing carbohydrates to lose fat. So it's really looking at, like Johan said, we know the basics work and are good for us, getting in our fruit and veggies, eating, protein at every meal, managing stress and steps. But trying to look long-term, think long-term. Am I going to be able to sustain what I'm doing right now a year from now? Right? That's a good question to ask yourself. And people often are just impatient, right? So decide, okay, is this something I think I can do long term? And then actually commit to doing it for 6 months, not 1 month to 2 months, and you think, oh, nothing's happening, nothing's changing, oh, it's not working for me. It takes time to see change, and the more sustainable your approach, the more success you will have long term. You'll have long term change. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
I totally agree. I want to add one thing though. Things like calorie deficits, are technically not sustainable in the long run, right? If we stay in a deficit. And so sometimes we do need to make, short-term kind of trade-offs to eventually get to a sustainable place, right? So when it comes to dieting, for example, it's totally true. You're totally right. And we need to figure out a way where we teach you, hey, how can we get you to diet, for example, so that in the future you also know how to do it right, and how can we also take you back and bring you back from that. So I wanted to point that out because sometimes people use that almost as an argument against dieting, right? Against a calorie deficit, and being oh, diets don't work. Well, they do in a way, but getting you to keep the weight off, for example, that's the hard part. So diets work, but that second bit, which we talked about, I believe in episode 3, that's the hard part.
Yeah. And something to think about, like if you're really confused and you seem to just not be able to figure it out on your own, hire a coach that you follow, that you trust. That can be super helpful. Even if you're just with them for like 3-6 months, they're going to help put you on the right track. Well, a good coach will. That is what you need as an individual, right? And they're going to teach you these different things that you can now take with you down the road when you're not working with each other. It's so beneficial. It's such a beneficial investment. And I'm not saying this because we're coaches. Like I'm not even taking clients on right now, but Johan is. But it's seriously, it helps you kind of cut through the BS. But you have to find a coach that is open-minded too, right? Because again, there are coaches that are biased, and in their ways, but finding one that has an open mind and can help you through what is right for you.
And even that takes a little bit of figuring out. And because there's a lot of like coaches, for the people who are not watching, like I'm doing air quotes, there's a lot of coaches out there on social media who basically just train, and they're good at training and they look like they train, and then they're like, hey, you know what? We just sell my program, which is okay.
I was gonna say that, yeah.
But like, you don't know if these people did do a course, or maybe not at all. Whether they have done 10 courses, 20 courses, because there's people who have done a whole lot. Whether they have experience, whether they have results, which makes it difficult actually to find a good coach.
Something too to think about. So these people, there's so much information, and there's people, driving keto and carnivore and like veggies are bad and all of this type of stuff. Take a real hard look at these people. Like, are they trying to sell something? Right? Because typically they are. And that's something to really just keep an eye on and be aware of, that there's something driving them to push one thing. And it's typically because they're trying to sell something, right? They're making money from that. So always just keep that in the back of your head. Like someone who is pushing that veggies and fruits are bad, that does not make sense. It just does not make sense.
It's almost like, like we've talked shit about everything. We've covered, fats in the 80s, and then it was carbs, and then, it's like, okay, one by one, let's attack everything, because it's like something new out there, like something that we haven't heard, or at least for a while. And you're so right. Liver King is a great example. He's like promoting, eat liver and all this shit, and, live like our ancestors. And like click on the link and it's right there, selling supplements,
right.
Of like, beef liver supplements and all that, which, hey, I'm not even against, because some people would like to get those nutrients, but don't necessarily want to eat, beef liver. However, like our, ancestors weren't taking supplements, right? Carnivore MD too. Like he's like talking shit on fruits and vegetables, or I believe I actually saw a video recently where it was actually including a little bit of fruit now. So you see that even those dudes are slowly like changing sometimes, like sneaky, like making a little bit of a transition sometimes, but like same thing. You go there and it's like supplements, right? In the last episode, I talked about a doctor who's like a fertility doctor, which is great, by the way, and he has his doctor title, but those people don't get any training in nutrition, And here they are, selling supplements, programs, and be careful. Like literally, like if you're like, I wonder if this is true, just go to their link and you'll see right away.
Right.
Usually.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway.